Welcome to the September 26, 2024 business meeting of the Schuylkill Township Board of Supervisors. We'll start the business meeting with a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight we have with us from the board, John Callahan, Danielle Juen, Martha Majeski, Bob Cooney is here by phone, and myself, Mark Donovan. We have Bob Wilson, he's attorney for open space, for our open space acquisition. Bill Brennan, our township solicitor, and a bunch of folks from our bond council and PFM. So we'll go right ahead to the treasurer's report and payment of bills. Make a motion for approval of disbursements dated September 26, 2024. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There is no old business, and we're right on to new business. I'll invite you guys up if you'd like to take this time to present anything you'd like. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Schlesinger. I'm with PFM. I was here a couple weeks ago to describe the potential opportunity to finance the acquisition of open space. We went through a number of items that deal with the bond process as well as what the market looks like. And for tonight, you authorize us to do the proper advertising to come tonight to discuss the parameters ordinance. So with me is more suits. I'm Jamie Schlesinger, BFM. We have Mark Stein and Bill Benzing from Eckert Siemens. They're going to serve as your bond counsel. They'll provide the tax-exempt opinion and do all the necessary legal filings related to the filing for DCD. And then Tim Kerr from briefly touch on a few things, and since Tim's here, he can jump in if you guys have any questions that are past my pay grade. So just to point number one, on the first page, we traditionally show you an interest rate chart. I think most people have heard that the Federal Reserve reduced interest rates by 50 basis points last week, and I feel pretty smart. I think I said there wasn't going to be much movement in the bond market, and that's what happened. Not much happened with the bond market overall. Frankly, we've actually seen U.S. Treasury rates go up a little bit, which I don't understand how that works, but that's what happened. So needless to say, more than likely what happened was on the bond side, most of the analysts believed that the Fed was going to do this. We've heard the Fed talking about this, so much of the expectation of the Fed reduction happened. We built it into the interest rates we've been thinking about. What traditionally drives your underlying interest rate when we go to market will be really multiple things. Most importantly is going to be your credit rating, which I'm going to touch on a little bit. And then secondarily, it's really supply and demand. Are there people that want strong credited GO bonds with a great name and the ability to pay back its debt service? And all those things are going to happen with this transaction. So I feel very confident when we go to market, PNC is going to fund a ton of investors and we'll be able to get strong interest rates when the time comes. So from that perspective, we have a few things to get done, and we are looking to hopefully price the bonds pretty much the last week in October. We haven't finalized it exactly just yet, but what we're going to do is kind of work around what the bond schedule is expected. There's going to be a decent amount of supply in the market at that time because a few people are going to try to get it in the market before the election. So we're going to find a good place to put it. We're going to do the necessary steps tied to the legal side, get the credit rating done, and once we get into that bond pricing, we'll have an established bond purchase agreement that will be signed by the Township and by the PNC Capital Markets, approved under the parameters that we're going to talk about tonight. So that's a really important step here, is once we have that established bond purchase agreement, it's really just the steps necessary to get us to settlement. you'll have your money, pretty quickly thereafter. Turn to the next page. I'll be relatively brief on this. Again, this is just the highlighting of the process. We talked about it, and obviously you have your bond counsel here, but for purposes of discussion, when you issue general obligation debt as a township, you have to follow certain rules under the state guidelines. And this process that we're going to be going through tied to the ordinance, which is a parameters ordinance, and the filings that's going to be made through several steps, we're going to get an approval that will happen probably the next 3 weeks or so, and so it's all said and done. Once we have that approval, you should be ready to kind of get the pricing and ultimately get the settlement. The approval process is not based on if the state believes you're doing something correctly by acquiring an open space. What they're making sure you do is following all the rules that are associated with their laws. And these are the specialists that will make sure you go through that process correctly. So
Thank you.
make sure that happens. Secondarily, there are certain documents that are going to get signed tonight, one of which is the borrowing-based certificate and debt statement. Good news about the debt statement, it's at 0 right now, so that was easy math for us. The borrowing-based certificate is essentially a calculation that says how much you're allowed to borrow under your rules. It's essentially a math calculation that takes your 3-year historic total revenues and divides it by 3, and that average times 250%. And given where we are today, I believe that number was $20-something million, give or take. So you have borrowing capacity as a entity to acquire and purchase other properties through non-electoral debt, and that's what we're doing through non-electoral debt.
Did you use just the open space funds or all of it? Okay.
You're supposed to use all the funds. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that calculation is done every time you enter into any public transaction. So should we ever do future bond issues, we redo that again, net out the borrowings that you've done, and that'll determine how much money is available going forward. Outside of that, we talked about all those other items, but again, everything else is looking pretty good. Page 3 looks a little slimmer than last time because we determined the concept of what we're going to try to do. In this case, this is a summary of an estimate of what your annual debt service will look like on a 25-year amortization. What's important here is we structured it as a level debt service structure, which is allowed under Pennsylvania with good requirements. And 2, we estimated what the interest rate would be. This is, I think, somewhat conservative, but right now we're expecting your overall rate to be just under 4%. And based on the proposed amortization schedule and interest rates, that overall payment would be about $650,000 per year. Very nicely, it works very well because that's about half the amount you're receiving in your open space tax. So that will give us some additional flexibility should you find other properties to acquire or additional renovations necessary for any of your properties. We have room to fit within your current portfolio. In addition, because we're talking about borrowing $10 million, as we talked about previously, you have $13 million in the bank. You'll get $10 million from this, give or take, and then using the balance to acquire the property, you should have additional funds from your open space fund for other things as well. So it serves both purposes to give you liquidity, and it's also affordable for the taxpayer. Questions? Frankly, the balance is really just some backup information. I will briefly touch on the timelines for the end, but just because you may be interested, page 4 is essentially what your amortization schedule will look like. So even though we showed you that nice pretty color page that shows you what your annual payments are, in real life what will happen is the township will pay its principal payments in December of each year, and it will pay interest twice a year, June and December. That's how bonds work. It pays twice a year interest, principal once a year. We structured it so it's at the end of your calendar year so you can collect all your revenues throughout the year, put them into the bank, and be able to pay your debt service. This should work very well for your fund overall. Again, structuring-wise, the column you should most look at is column 4. That's the yields. That's really the underlying interest rate. These are, again, I think pretty good interest rates in general, but hopefully we'll do a little better than that. Outside of that, that's the concept behind the structuring. It looks something similar to this. Finally, the last few pages are really just the backup that's tied to the sources and uses of funds. You have to borrow money and pay things back when it comes to cost of issuance. We've made some estimates. We're not all the way just there yet, but understand that whatever net of the cost will be available for the deposit for the acquisition of the property. Again, we're estimating right now something like $9.9 million all in as we work this process. I think our estimated settlement date, based on how things are looking, will probably be toward probably the end of November, early December range. That's really tied to just how fast we get the approvals and frankly just getting some of the documentation put together. But we think that's a good range of what we're expecting at this point in time. We'll figure that out a little later. From that perspective, I will just touch on what are called the maximum parameters. You heard me talk about that we are going to be asking you to consider an ordinance that is higher than we're actually going to borrow. I mentioned number $12 million, and that is it. So we do this because we want to have maximum flexibility for when PNC is going to go out to market, when we get the coupons and the interest rates. And that gives us some flexibility to move the principal amounts within different ranges depending on what the market looks like at that time. The max interest rate of 6% is not tied to the yield technically, it's really tied to the couponing. More than likely, if you saw, we will probably have couponing in the 4 to 5% range. The yields would drive your overall cost to you. But understand we have max amounts of principal, max interest rates, and a max final maturity, and that's in line with what our expected final maturity is about 25 years from today. Questions? Okay. And finally, just hit on the timeline, just to touch on a few items. I think the most important step after we get through these legal proceedings here is we will have a rating call scheduled with Standard & Poor's on October 8th. We scheduled that obviously after this approval to make sure we're not accumulating any costs for you. Obviously, assuming tonight gets approved, we will be going through this rating process. The way it works is there will be a list of questions provided by an analyst through Standard & Poor's, or really three main firms that do this type of thing. It is S&P, Moody's, and Fitch generally, there's a couple others. S&P is the one we're going to use. They will provide us with questions about the financials of the town, demographics, purpose of the...
Sorry, do you need somebody available from the township?
Yes.
You got that going? Okay. All right, okay.
I'm here.
We got that.
Good question. Yes, so we'll be working with staff. We have questions already. They were very kind to get us the questions, so we're going to have a preparation call in advance. They're very standard type questions for this type of credit. It's going to be traditionally looking at kind of several items. It's going to be the financial background, liquidity, cash reserves, the overall demographics of the town. So in this case, wealth levels, census history, tax collections, who are your top taxpayers. Now, because your township has an EIT, we know how it's being paid, it's an easier conversation to have. But those are the type of questions that they're going to ultimately focus on. And then there's some other oddities that they'll ask you about cybersecurity and other things that are kind of tied to this world these days. But overall, we feel pretty comfortable based on the credit profile of the township and the questions that we'll get that we'll probably come back with a pretty strong credit rating. I'm speculating AA category. We'll see how close I get. Based on that, the stronger you are, the lower the interest rate. So we're going to do our best to get the best credit rating possible. Questions on the concept of the rating? Okay. And from there, as we talked about,
Is there anything that we can do between now and that question?
just the preparation that we'll do.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be ready to go.
Okay.
You can't do anything more than you've already done at this point in time.
Okay, great.
So from there, it's really getting that credit rating completed. We'll probably have that probably around the 18th or so. Once that happens, we're going to finalize the rest of the documentation. One of those things is the preliminary official statement. That's the document that Tim and his team are going to go and find investors. And again, that's going to have more information about the township so the investors understand what they're buying. That process will take a little bit of time to get it all completed. This group here will help facilitate that. We've already gotten a bunch of information from the township already to have us ready to go for that. Once we have that completed, we're going to find a good price. I think as we talked about, it'll probably be the week of Halloween, give or take, maybe a little bit earlier if we can get it done a little quicker. If all that happens, we'll lock in the interest rates and we'll settle as fast as humanly possible. That's the process. So, easy peasy, easy stuff.
And, you gave us this calendar before. You don't see any bumps in the road or any issues yet? I shouldn't say yet,
There's none yet here.
so far.
No,
Yeah.
there's nothing I expect here.
Okay.
Because you have the right professionals, you're doing all the legal requirements, you're following all the rules.
Okay.
It's really just getting us the kind of the steps to the process where we're in a good place.
Okay, thank you.
So unless you have mathematical or other questions from the timeline, we have an ordinance that's been duly advertised in the Pottstown Mercury under the requirements of the Local Government Union Debt Act. It's been duly advertised, your solicitors reviewed it, among other lawyers as well. So we've had some time to do that. As part of that ordinance, I'll be very brief in this and get the real answers from the lawyers, but this is a document that includes all of the requirements that fall under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. It names who the purchaser of the bonds are, PNC Capital Markets. It names the amount we're going to borrow up to $12 million. It names the maximum interest rates, the maturity, the paying agent, which we bid out and found at this point in time, and all the other pertinent requirements that follow the statute. It also authorizes the necessary parties to do what they need to do to sign all the documents and get us this settlement. So there'll be no more action necessary by the supervisors for us to get ourselves ready to settle. That is the only thing you'll have to sign once you execute and authorize it. So it will be done after this, pending, of course, the bond sale, and if we'll make a decision to go to market. So we'll certainly be talking to staff to make that decision if we feel comfortable, we'll recommend moving forward. So I'll stop and let them answer any questions if you need them to answer.
Jamie did a great job summarizing the ordinance.
As you said, I said, my dad was a lawyer, so.
This is the first ordinance I've run into where the title goes 2 pages. I have to tell you that. I've been doing this 48 years.
That's a historical anomaly that
I'm sorry, can you come up to the microphone?
Yeah, that's a drafting anomaly that I've used since I started practicing law in this arena in 1984. But this is the summary that goes into the newspaper, so it's a way of making sure that
Makes
it's
sense, yeah.
appropriately summarized for public record.
Good.
Questions from the board? For Jamie or for bond counsel? Or for the underwriter? No?
All right, now, just in terms of how we're going to do this in order, this is on, it's on the second page. Should we be, do you think we should pass the resolution and sign the agreement first, or does it matter? Does it matter which is first or second in order?
The agreement for the hearing and
The agreement of sale. We have an agreement of sale to sign and a resolution. I guess it doesn't matter, I guess, huh? Probably not, okay.
We have the agreement of sale first.
You may want to just follow the agenda.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Sorry?
Follow the agenda.
We'll follow the.
I guess
Follow the
I-
agenda, okay, that's
Hey,
fine.
Jamie, I'm sorry, I do have one question, but I'm not complaining about it. On page 5 with the uses, bond issue, insurance, 0 basis points. So we don't need insurance. I guess what would be,
It's a different type of insurance you may, I know you decided business. When you have bonds that will have a high credit rating, more than likely, we will not need a secondary insurance called municipal bond insurance to provide extra assurance to the bondholders that if you fail to make a debt service payment, they'll come and pay for it.
okay.
So if you receive the credit rating I expect you to get, it won't make economic sense to pay for that premium.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Cool. Good to go. Great. All right, thanks so much for the presentation. We're going to move on to consideration of approval of agreement of sale for fee simple acquisition of 930 Valley Forge Road, UPI number 27-6-47. This is an acquisition of property for the purpose of conserving open space. I'll make a motion that we approve the agreement. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Oh, wait, no, do we allow public comment?
Oh,
Public comment, just.
you're right. Public comment? Any public comment?
Public comment on the purchase of the property.
We'll also take public comment at the end.
Yeah, we will also take public comment at the end as well. Seeing none, okay, now, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. On to resolutions and ordinances. I'll make a motion that we consider that we adopt resolution number 2024-20, approving open space acquisition. Do I hear a second?
This is overkill in one sense. It's a resolution authorizing the signing. There are two steps here. One is signing, one is the formal resolution. It has the agreement attached to it. So it just confirms your action.
Yep, thanks, Bill. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any public comment? Any additional comments from the board? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is that?
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2024-05, bond parameters. Is that,
You want to read the whole motion?
yeah. And that is a motion to enact an ordinance in the form presented, authorizing, among other things, the incurrence of debt in an amount not to exceed $12 million to be evidenced by one or more series of the township's general obligation bonds, the process of which will be
Proceeds.
Thank you. The proceeds of which will be used to acquire and improve certain real estate to be used for township purposes. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Any further comments from,
Just the advertising information should be attached to the original.
Yep, I have
Okay,
it.
got it? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
okay, good. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Sorry for the delay, guys.
Oh, no, you're good. I'm glad we got you. Okay, so there's no additional business, and right on to any public comment. Anybody have anything?
Just have 1 second. Mark, would you be able to send me the solicitor's letter that I'll be just on? Okay, thank you. Okay.
You'll see more documents from us than you care to.
Great. All right.
You see his binder there, his two binders? He said earlier tonight that that's been since August, so you're gonna
Beginning of August,
definitely
yeah.
add to that, right?
You'll get a disc or some kind of maybe electronics. We won't come with these that way.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As soon as possible.
Thank
See you.
Thanks. Okay.
All right.
Public comment, okay.
Any public comment? We have a few members of the public, so if you'd like to speak, please come to the mic, state your name, address. You know the deal by this point, I hope.
Hi, Steve. Amanda Petty, 26 Dorchester Way. Can I ask a question? Is the East Village egress still involved? Or is there still a lane there? Or is it not part of the property boundaries? It looks like there's a red line there. I wasn't sure what it was.
For East Phillip Drive, is that what you said?
Yeah.
So as part of the agreement of sale that the board just voted to approve, we have retained, well, we will be granted an easement that will allow us access for township maintenance, pedestrian access, and emergency access. Yeah, but, correct.
Yeah, no vehicle.
Great. Thank you for your efforts. I think it's fantastic.
All right, anybody else? Seeing none, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.